Hi everyone, it's Christina from Photos Prepped here. Thank you so much for liking my last tutorial, how to set up back button focusing on a Canon R5 camera. Today, I'll still talk about action photography and I'll use pet action photography as an example. I'm going to show you how to take sharp images of a pet running towards a camera. The success of getting any kind of action photography really depends on this, which is your camera's ability to grab the focus and lock the focus on the subject this whole time. I'm going to show you how to set up the 3 core settings in any cameras, but I'll use the Sony a7 III and a Canon R5 cameras to illustrate my points. So I hope you like this tutorial. Please subscribe to my channel and like this video if you find this tutorial useful. So let's get started. There are 3 settings that you need to determine to capture your pet running towards a camera. And this applies to all types of cameras, and I'll use Sony a7 III and Canon R5 cameras to illustrate my points. So the settings in your cameras are the shutter speed, the drive mode, and the focusing. I'll talk about them one by one. The equipment that I used was a Sony a7 III camera and the 24-105mm f4 zoom lens. I'll also show you how to nail the settings in a Canon R5 mirrorless camera. The lens that I used with the Canon R5 camera is the 70-200mm f2.8 telephoto lens. So today's model is Monkey. He's my friend Heidi's Pomeranian puppy. And he's the model for the Sony a7 III camera. And this is Cha-Cha, my friend Winnie's Pomeranian dog. And she will be the model for the Canon R5 camera. So point number 1, the shutter speed. Your shutter speed should be faster than 1/500th of a second for capturing moving subjects. If your pet is a fast runner, then 1/1000th of a second is an ideal shutter speed. Monkey was shaking himself and I used 1/1000th of a second to freeze the motion and the photo was pretty sharp. However, initially I used 1/500th of a second and obviously it wasn't fast enough to get a sharp image. So the tip here is to take a test shot with the shutter speed that you've chosen and then review the image immediately to see if this shutter speed is fast enough to freeze the motion. Talking about shutter speed, I have to also briefly mention about the exposure of an image because shutter speed is part of it. If you're an experienced photographer, that's great. Please go get some coffee and come back in 2 minutes. If you're a beginner, please listen to this. Bear in mind that there are only 3 variables that control how much light comes into the camera, or essentially the exposure of an image. ISO controls the camera's sensitivity to light, aperture controls the quantity of light, and the shutter speed controls the duration of light. Each of the 3 variables has a secondary effect. For ISO, the secondary effect is the noise of the image, and aperture also controls the depth of field, whereas the shutter speed determines the sense of motion. Check out my YouTube tutorial on the exposure triangle to learn more. I always shoot on the manual mode of the camera so that I can control the 3 variables instead of letting the camera make the decision. And of course, you can shoot on the shutter speed priority mode, in which you would choose your desired shutter speed and let the camera pick the aperture and the ISO to get a well-exposed image. And because you have no say in the aperture and the ISO under the shutter speed priority mode, you might risk getting some secondary effects that you do not want. To learn how to manipulate the variables in the exposure triangle like a pro, please sign up for our in-person or virtual beginners and intermediate workshops. Okay, back to pet action photography. I was shooting on the manual mode, and the shutter speed that I chose was 1/1000th of a second. The aperture was f4 in order to get sufficient amount of depth of field, and in fact, f4 is the widest aperture on my lens. And I picked ISO 800 randomly based on my experience of shooting in the afternoon. And then I did a test shot. The image was too dark. Since I was not willing to change the shutter speed and f4 was the widest aperture, the only option was bumping up the ISO. I nailed my exposure for the shot, which is ISO 2500, aperture f4, and shutter speed 1/1000th of a second. A high ISO will result in a grainy image, but since I was using a full-frame Sony a7 III camera, the noise wasn't a big deal. So, camera setting number 2, the drive mode. The drive mode is where you can set the camera's self-timer, single or continuous shooting. And for fast-moving action photography, you want to choose continuous shooting, which is essentially the burst mode. When you keep holding down the shutter button, the camera will continuously capture the images, and you'll get a sequence of action photos in quick succession. Most cameras offer low and high-paced continuous shooting, but if you choose single instead of continuous shooting, the camera will only take one picture even though you keep holding down the shutter button. So don't do that in action photography. Make sure you choose the continuous shooting as your drive mode. Lastly, focusing. As mentioned earlier, the success of action photography depends on the camera's ability to capture the focus quickly and keep it on the subject this whole time. While technology plays an important role, you can help the camera do its job by setting the focus options correctly. For the focus mode, select autofocus continuous servo so that the camera will keep updating the focus as the subject moves. In the Canon world, focus mode is called AF operation, whereas the autofocus continuous servo is called servo. As for the focus area, select wide or tracking. Different camera brands will call their tracking functionality a different name. For Sony, tracking is called lock-on AF. Under the lock-on AF, you can choose wide, zone, center, flexible spot small, medium, and large, and expand flexible spot. And I'll choose expand flexible spot. I'm going to use the joystick to move the focus on the dog so that the camera is able to grab the initial focus and lock on it as it tracks the dog across the frame. If I did not know where the dog would appear, then I'll use lock on AF wide. Bear in mind that the lock on AF wide is not the focus area wide option. For Canon, focus area is called the AF method. For Canon mirrorless cameras such as R5 and R6, tracking is actually IAF, and you also want to set the subject to detect to be the animals. I'll show you how to do so in a minute. However, the IAF technology was not available in older Canon cameras. So for Canon DSLR cameras such as the 5D Mark IV and the Canon 90D, select auto selection as the AF method. Oh, this is a long video. If you're still with me, please comment down below the name of your pet or pets. If you don't have a pet, just say no pet. Okay, I'm going to show you how to set the drive mode and the focus options in a Sony a7 III camera. So first of all, press the FN button on the camera body and you will see this. The first box is the drive mode. Okay, so you have single shooting and continuous shooting. So choose continuous shooting. So you have different options under continuous shooting. High plus, high, medium, low, and I will select high plus. Okay, so next is the focus mode. So under the focus mode, you have different options. Autofocus single servo, and this is for non-moving subject. Autofocus automatic, autofocus continuous servo, and other focus options. So select autofocus continuous servo as your focus mode so that when you press the shutter halfway down or press the AF on button, the camera will keep updating the focus on the moving subject. Next is the focus area. So under the focus area, we have a bunch of options: wide, zone, center, flexible spot, expand flexible spot, and lock on AF. So lock on AF is the tracking functionality of the Sony system. So select your focus area to be the lock on AF, and specifically you want to do lock on AF expand flexible spot. All right. It is very important for the camera to grab the initial focus on the subject and lock the focus on him as he moves. So before Monkey starts to run, I will place the focus point on his body, and because my focus area is set on tracking, which is lock on AF, the camera will be able to recognize the subject and keep the focus on him when he moves. Ooh. Wow. Look at that. Look at that. me check on those eyes. Oh my gosh, so good. Thank you so much, Monkey. Yeah, let's do one more. Probably my shutter speed is not high enough. Okay, let's do 1000. Okay, Monkey is really, really fast, so I'm gonna increase my shutter speed to 1000, and then in order to make my photo well exposed, I also have to bump up the ISO to 250, okay? Awesome. I've also asked Heidi to hide behind a bush after she threw the ball so that she won't be in the shot. Wait. Yeah, right here. I'm locking the focus on him. Ready? Yeah. Get him. Perfect. Okay. Okay, I'm going to show you how to select the drive mode, AF operation, and AF method in a Canon R5 mirrorless camera. So first of all, you want to press the Q button on the camera body, and you will see this menu. So go to AF method, which is the first one. So in the Canon world, the submenu of that option is at the bottom of the screen. And you want to select this one, which is the IAF, so that the camera will look for the eye of an animal and keep the focus locked on this animal's eye this whole time. Then second, AF operation, you can choose between one shot and servo. So please select servo so that the camera will keep updating the focus continuously as you move the camera or when the subject moves. Okay, and then when you go down more, and this is the drive mode, you can choose different options under the drive mode. Single shooting, high speed continuous plus, high speed continuous, low speed continuous, and 2 types of self timers. And I would choose high speed continuous plus, so my camera will be set to burst mode, and as long as I'm pressing the shutter all the time, the camera will be keep shooting pictures. All right, now go to the menu. You want to tell the camera that you want to look for the eye of an animal, and this is what you need to do. So in the AF tab, go to page 1, select subject to detect, press set, and select animals. Press set to confirm. All right, and then lastly, still you're under the AF tab, but this time go to page 5 and select initial servo AF point for face detection and eye focus. So you have 3 options: initial AF point set for eye focus and face detection, AF point set for AF method, and auto. So please select initial AF point select for face detection and eye focus. So this is what the camera will do when you select this option. It will look for the eye of an animal as the initial focus, grab the focus, and then lock the focus on this animal. So press set to confirm. That's it. Cha-cha! We're Photo Sprout's photography workshop in San Francisco. Equipment is provided for beginners so that they do not need to buy a camera to attend a photography class.